Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Pellavito. I'll be your moderator for today's show, and we welcome people from the United States and, of course, around the world who are listening and learning more about medicine and science. Unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., the person who heads up our medical and science, or health and human resources, is not a medical doctor. And he doesn't even play one on TV. He's actually an environmental attorney, and his name is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But he also has some very serious issues when it comes to medicine. So we're going to go take a look at it, because his whole department got sued by a whole group of very outstanding medical doctors who just frankly can't stand the way he's been guiding the United States into oblivion. So with that, we're going to bring our expert in, Dr. Michael Patmos, who's actually board certified in internal medicine, who can make sense of what's going on in Washington, D.C. So Dr. Patmos, I don't know if you saw recently, major medical groups have sued RFK Jr. because his stance is just anti-scientific. It's like he doesn't know what he's doing. I don't know what your thoughts are, so we're going to bring you in.
Well, good morning, Nick. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you again today. It's funny, we think alike, and I was going to talk exactly about that lawsuit today. I've talked a lot about Robert F. Kennedy on this channel for the last year and a half or so, and spoken quite a bit about how he manipulates data, uses poor quality science, and so forth. But I thought today it would be good to actually read a statement from the lawyer who filed the following lawsuit, because it says in very articulate terms and much more sophisticated terminology than I could use off the top of my head. So I want to read to the audience today a post from Richard Hughes IV. Richard Hughes IV is a lawyer. He's with the law firm that is representing the plaintiffs in this case. He's also on the faculty at George Washington University Law School, and he's a well-known lawyer in a large firm in Washington, D.C. And he posted this, quote, "Today, we filed a lawsuit against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts to defend vaccine policy and to put an end to the Secretary's assault on science, public health, and evidence-based medicine. This administration is an existential threat to vaccination in America, and those in charge are only just getting started. If left unchecked, Secretary Kennedy will accomplish his goal of ridding the United States of vaccines, which would unleash a wave of preventable harm on our nation's children. This ends now. We bring this suit on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American College of Physicians, the American Public Health Association, the Infectious Diseases Society of America, the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, the Massachusetts Public Health Alliance, and a pregnant woman, Jane Doe, who is unable to obtain the COVID vaccine. Specifically, we are suing Secretary Kennedy, the FDA's Commissioner, Marty Makary, NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for acting arbitrarily and capriciously when he unilaterally changed COVID vaccine recommendations for children and pregnant people. The lawsuit charges that a coordinated set of actions by Health and Human Services and the Secretary were designed to mislead, confuse, and gradually desensitize the public to anti-vaccine and anti-science rhetoric, and that the Secretary has routinely flouted federal procedural rules. These actions include blocking CDC communication, unexplained cancellations of vaccine panel meetings at the FDA and CDC, announcing studies to investigate non-existent links between vaccines and autism, and unilaterally overriding immunization recommendations, Secretary Kennedy has also unjustly dismissed 17 members of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices and appointed replacements who have historically espoused anti-vaccine viewpoints. And I might add, parenthetically, misrepresented their credentials on their resumes. This committee, back to Mr. Hughes' statement, this committee has proceeded to undermine the science behind vaccine recommendations. The lawsuit asks for preliminary and permanent injunctions to enjoin the Secretary's rescissions of COVID-19 vaccine recommendations and a declaratory judgment pronouncing the change in recommendations as unlawful. And that was filed in the United States District Court for the District of Massachusetts. I think that statement really says it all. And from everything I know, every claim in that statement is absolutely true. Kennedy has ignored science. Kennedy, Makary, Bhattacharya have ignored published evidence, high quality evidence, credible evidence in credible journals, deferring instead to the evidence that has been retracted from junk science. I mean, they've intentionally disregarded real evidence to focus on poor evidence. They've blocked communications, and they overruled all the experts on COVID vaccination for pregnant women and children. I mean, the plaintiffs in this group, the American Academy of Physicians, American Academy of Pediatricians, that's the professional organization that represents pediatricians all across the United States. The American College of Physicians, of which I am a fellow, is a very noble organization. It's been around for well over 100 years, nearly 200 years, represents internal medicine trained physicians. The Infectious Diseases Society of America is the leading infectious disease society in the world. It represents board certified, fellowship trained infectious disease experts. The Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, who knows more about maternal fetal medicine than maternal fetal medicine fellowship trained specialists? So what we have here is a lawsuit filed by the best doctors in the world, naming a lawyer, a surgeon, and an economist for their arbitrary and capricious efforts to deny vaccination, life-saving vaccination to people. It's unconscionable. It's despicable. It's just absolutely abominable. And I hope this lawsuit is successful, because what Kennedy is doing is he is directly harming people in this country. This has already resulted in an outbreak of measles, the anti-vaccine, his anti-vaccine efforts. Over 1,200, nearly 1,300 people now have been confirmed to have measles in the United States, the worst outbreak in 33 years. We're now exporting measles abroad to neighboring countries. This is just unbelievable. And somebody has to put a stop to it. Thank God that these organizations, these prestigious groups of physicians, are doing what they can. I mean, here you have doctors, large organizations of doctors trying to stand up for public health, and they have to resort to the courts to do it because we have a crazy lawyer running health in this country. So that's my comments for today, and let's open it up.
Well, let's talk about measles. So, yeah, we have the most measles in the U.S. since 1992, which was 8 years before measles was announced to be eradicated in the U.S. So he's brought back a disease that we had taken out of circulation. So people think measles, no big deal. All right, so 3 people have died from measles so far this year. But there's other stuff. 1 in 5 unvaccinated people who get measles is hospitalized. 1 in 20 gets pneumonia. You can get a thing called immune amnesia, where measles wipes out between 11 and 73% of your immune cells, making you susceptible to other disease. I'm sure there are other long-term effects like subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, something that shows up 7 to 10 years after you get measles. So it's a hidden bonus. And so when you make an entire population skeptical of vaccines, you end up with a population that is sicker overall. That COVID can compromise your immune system. We have over 10 million Americans who have long COVID, who will get sick more easily, will spread sickness. We're just rolling back the clock to the first half of the 20th century, where one kid in 5 didn't make it, I think, to their first birthday in 1900.
That's exactly right, Rick. I got to just point out for people who don't know what subacute sclerosing panencephalitis is. It's an inflammatory disorder of the brain, and it's widespread throughout the brain. This shows up in patients who've had measles, and again, it shows up years later. It's a progressive neurological deterioration, and there's no treatment for it. It basically destroys the brain. These patients end up with all sorts of neurological issues, including cognitive issues, motor issues, seizures, dementia. It's, paralysis. It's an awful thing to have, and it's completely, totally preventable. It's a tragedy. These folks don't have enough understanding of medical history to know what it was like before. They're ignorant of the past, and so they have no idea where they're leading us. They're leading us right back into the 1800s, and if this continues, we will see a return of contagion and disease and harm to people that has not been seen in this country for a century or more. We're going right back there. And people will get a chance to, if you ever wondered what it was like in the 1700s, we're about to find out.
And you don't have to be fully sick to have your body clock run faster because you're a little sick a lot. Like the reason we're told to floss our teeth is that your gums and teeth are like, if you don't floss, you have a lot of bacteria. You swallow the bacteria every time you swallow your spit, and your whole body is a little bit inflamed from the bacteria, which makes your body break down faster.
That's a very good point. And what most people don't know is that periodontal disease, there's another reason why having taken care of your gums and so forth is very important. There's a direct correlation between periodontal disease and cardiovascular disease. Kennedy likes to say, well, we're going to take a break from infectious diseases so we can focus on chronic diseases like cardiac disease. Excuse me, cardiac disease may very well be an infectious disease. It certainly has implications. There's inflammatory. Yes, and the mouth is a good example of that.
When you swallow, all the bacteria you're swallowing goes right by your heart on the way down into your stomach. So it's easy if your whole thing is just like filled with bad spit, it's easy to make your heart angry.
Well, the anatomy, we could talk a little bit about that anatomy there. It gets into the bloodstream.
Okay, all right, so I'm wrong. But
let me give you this. When patients are having major heart surgery, like aortic valve replacement or other major heart surgery, the heart surgeons will actually, one of their preoperative requirements is that the patient has to have a dental visit and have any periodontal disease treated and cured before they perform heart surgery. So there's a very strong correlation. And so, to think that, cardiac disease, it has nothing to do with, taking a break from Kennedy says we have to take a break from infectious disease. I have bad news for him. Most diseases are infectious diseases. For example, we know, for example, I was talking about how cardiac disease has ties to infectious disease. Autoimmunity, lupus and rheumatoid and so many of these other chronic autoimmune diseases are strongly associated with underlying viral infections. So people get viruses, and then years later, the immune system is triggered by these viruses, and that's where it is believed that many autoimmune diseases come from. So in infectious diseases, the professors always jokingly, sort of, tongue in cheek say, well, all diseases are infectious diseases. Well, Not all diseases are infectious diseases, but most diseases are infectious diseases. So when you say take a break from infectious diseases, what on earth are you talking about? You don't understand what causes illness. Robert Kennedy thinks that illness is caused by, ultra processed foods. So he wants all these ultra processed foods to go away. And then the other day, he's complimenting a company that makes frozen foods. It's all ultra processed. I don't think he understands. I think he has a bumper sticker level understanding of chemistry with respect to food sources and foods. He doesn't understand the basics of chemistry.
Well, he's doing two things. He's trying to clean up our food supply ineffectively, as you just said, and he's trying to get rid of vaccines and increase medical skepticism. And the gains from eating cleaner are way less than the gains you get from frickin' medicine. You say you eat clean and you maintain a healthy weight, maybe you get 5 extra years, but the possible extra years you get from trusting medicine, for the most part, yeah, you should do some research. You should, be informed about what your medical issues are, but and make sure your doctors are not idiots. But most doctors aren't idiots, and you get so many more years from modern medicine than you do from not eating hamburgers.
They talk about ultra processed foods. I did a little piece the other day on what are ultra processed foods that you didn't know were ultra processed foods. And things like vegan, gluten-free veggie burgers. That's an ultra processed food. Granola bars are an ultra processed food. Greek yogurt is an ultra processed food. So, people think they're eating healthy. Those are the very things that Robert Kennedy says we need to get rid of. So it's funny. But, on a serious note, another thing that Kennedy did that's really outrageous from a global perspective is we just withdrew funding from Gavi, Gavi. That's a global consortium for distribution of vaccines to the poorest of the poor around the world. And the reason why Gavi came into existence was because, in developed nations, people have access to vaccinations, and we were getting the benefits of that. But in the third world, distribution of vaccines to these places is logistically difficult, and the manufacturers have no financial incentive to do so. So a global consortium, a true example of collaboration of countries around the world and organizations with donations, raise money. And the United States was the second largest donor to Gavi, raised money to distribute hundreds of millions of dollars, actually billions of dollars of vaccines around the world to the poorest of the poor, to the most destitute and deprived countries. Mainly children in these countries have been receiving vaccines as a result of Gavi. Well, Robert F. Kennedy just unilaterally withdrew the United States from Gavi, withdrew its financial support. We're the second largest supporter financially. The UK is a bigger supporter than we are. And this will threaten Gavi's ability to do its job. And it is projected that it will result in hundreds of thousands, let me say that again, hundreds of thousands of deaths, preventable deaths around the world, mostly in children of color in third world countries. What on earth are we doing? It's a wholesale slaughter of third world children of color. How horrible have we become as a country to do that? And Kennedy's justification is, well, they didn't really look at the safety issues enough.
Vaccines are tested. They have the standard 3-step protocol, 3 levels of clinical trials. It takes like a decade. And I got to disagree with you. You said hundreds of thousands of deaths around the world. Try hundreds of thousands of deaths around the world per year. So I have the numbers. Since 2000, Gavi has helped vaccinate over 1.1 billion children, preventing an estimated 18.8 million deaths. They're saving 750,000 lives a year. So if you cut that in half, you're killing hundreds of thousands of kids a year.
Thank you for that added information and context. That's correct. I appreciate that, Rick, very much. But I have to step back for a second and think about what we're doing here. We have become cruel. We have lost our empathy. When you take ignorance and a lack of empathy, you get cruelty. We're becoming cruel. We're becoming a cruel country. We're cruel to the most vulnerable. Here you see the commercials on TV for save the poor children, save the children, and here we are withdrawing from an organization that's proven to benefit millions of children around the world, and we're withdrawing from it. This country, the United States, has become a heartless, cold, cruel country. It's hard to fathom if you step back and just look at what we have become, and then you just see people posting these, rah, absolutely. In fact, one of the congressmen the other day, Gavin Newsom, made a post about the cutting of Medicaid and how it's going to result in harm to poor and disabled and the elderly. And one of the Republican congressmen said, yeah, that's right. Yep. That's right. We've lost empathy. A nation, a people, a civilization, a culture that loses empathy is on the verge of becoming something horrible. It's on the verge of becoming, well, we know what happened in the 1930s when a whole country lost empathy.
Yeah, and I keep bringing it up, and it's unsubstantiated, but other people seem to believe the same thing, that in the 1930s, you had a world population that had the Spanish flu. At least like a third of the planet had the Spanish flu. It had mental effects. And starting in the 20s, we had fascism, which was a new thing. It was a thing that hadn't existed on Earth under that term before the 1920s. And by the end of the 1930s, we were at world war. So there's a possibility that if you have a sick population whose brains work like crap, they're more susceptible to meanness, to mass movements that are destructive. We could be on a terrible path.
I want to make a comment. I'm sorry, Nick, did you want to say something?
Yeah, the thing is, are they against smallpox and polio vaccines? I mean, the thing is, it looks to me that smallpox eliminated quite a bit of the population. And so I got a smallpox vaccine, and I think even the head of the Habsburg's family's oldest child died, but one of his big regrets is he didn't get his son vaccinated. So, and what about polio? I mean, polio just devastated a lot of people, including Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but this isn't that long ago. Are these people in Washington against are they pro smallpox and polio? I mean, seriously, is that what they want?
We forget, there's generational forgetting. If you look at the history of major wars in the world, they happen about every 80 to 100 years. It's been 80 years since World War II. And nobody in 1947 would have wanted a repeat of World War II. But we're almost 80 years later, we don't remember how horrible it was. Nobody remembers how horrible polio was. My uncle was one of the last guys to get polio, and I only saw his legs a couple times, and they were freaking horrifying. But most people don't, I'm old. The younger people don't have any idea what smallpox looks like, or what polio does. And so they're like, those are things that, it's easy to forget.
Smallpox, to read about the history of smallpox, it was a really impressive disease. I just want to make a comment. I want to reach out directly to doctors because I've been very disappointed when I communicate with people and talk with people online. I had a conversation yesterday on Doximity with some doctors, and there's a doctor this morning on LinkedIn who, in reference to alligator Alcatraz, said, well, don't if you don't do the time, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. So I want to make a statement to physicians and say, I want you to step back for a second. Politics aside, your political affiliation aside, put all of that aside, put aside any, ethnic issues or or national boundaries, and just step back and think about what it is, the core thing that unites us as physicians, that which we are supposed to hold most dear, is empathy for a fellow human being. If you go back and you look at the Hippocratic Oath, the Oath of Maimonides, everything every kind of oath we ever took, the whole reason we went into medical school in the first place was because of the desire to want to care for other human beings. Empathy. When a culture loses empathy, we are in trouble. When physicians lose empathy, that really shocks me and it scares me. That's how you get Joseph Mengele. That's how you get physicians who can start experimenting on human beings against their will in cruel and awful ways. And I would just put out a plea to physicians, wherever you may be on the political spectrum, take a step back and ask yourself, are you losing your empathy? Have you lost your compassion for your fellow human beings? Doesn't matter if they're illegal or legal. Doesn't matter if they're a good person or a bad person, a drug addict or not a drug addict. Doesn't matter what their station in life is. Remember the Hippocratic Oath. Whatsoever house I enter, I go for the benefit of the patient. What does that mean? That means we do not judge people based on anything, on any criteria. Human beings who are suffering and sick and in need deserve our medical expertise, our compassion, and our empathy. And I am urging physicians to step back and ask yourself, have you lost your empathy?
Can we talk about smallpox if that ever got loose again? So
I want to go back to here. I'm trying to talk about everything.
Sorry, but okay, so everybody's like this to their phones. And, we all have huge TVs. So we notice if a movie star has a little zit right here, right? Because their face is this big. Smallpox. Imagine if you took your face, you lay down, and you just covered your face with lentil soup. That's what active smallpox looks like. Your whole face erupts in pustules. And then when you're done, you're left with a disfigured face. And that would make you, we have a baby shortage now. Imagine a population with, faces that look like somebody took a shotgun blast to the face. That's what smallpox does.
And it's not just the face, it's the whole body. And it's awful. It's an awful disease. Over the course of history, if you look at the course of human history, I don't think any disease has killed as many people as smallpox. It's a scourge. And to have eliminated it from the face of the earth was the greatest, in my opinion, it's the greatest single human accomplishment in human history. We've never eliminated any other disease from the face of the earth but smallpox. And we could do that. We could eliminate other diseases. We were close to eliminating polio, but then the anti-vaccine movement came along and pulled out the rug from under our efforts. Yeah, it's absolutely right. That comment about the lentil soup, I have reservations at a Moroccan restaurant for lunch, but I'm going to have to change those now.
Sorry.
What about tuberculosis, Dr. Pappas? I mean, when I was growing up, they had TB hospitals, and I believe they had iron lungs. In other words, what happened is these people that when they got this, would be on an iron lung sometimes for the rest of their lives. Are we now pro iron lung for people? Is that what Washington is all about?
So tuberculosis is something is near and dear to my heart. When I was a medical student, I had the opportunity to meet Dr. William Stead, who's long gone, but he was one of the great professors who wrote about a resurgence of tuberculosis. He was involved. He was actually one of the ones who helped develop the first treatments for tuberculosis with rifampin and streptomycin and isoniazid and all the anti-TB drugs. Dr. William Stead is a giant of medicine, and for those who know medical history, I had a chance to meet him and make rounds with him when I was a medical student. In any case, tuberculosis is an awful disease. It's a chronic bacterial disease. It just eats your lungs, spreads throughout your body, and it is very chronic and slow over your lifetime. Eleanor Roosevelt died of tuberculosis involving her bone marrow. But TB was endemic. It was everywhere back at the turn of the century, and most hospitals in the United States back around 1900 were actually TB sanitariums. And what happened if you had TB back then? It's legal and still the law, public health law. They would come and pick you up, take you kicking and screaming, whether you wanted to or not, away to a TB sanitarium to get you away from the public so you don't infect everybody else. And you would stay there until lifelong, held against your will, because there was no treatment, and people would stay there until they spontaneously got better, or until they died. They came and took you away. When I was in practice, I had patients who were children who remember their parents being taken away. One patient of mine was a child who was taken away from his home because he had TB and placed in a TB sanitarium. Most hospitals today, if you go back and look in history, had their roots as TB sanitariums. That's how commonplace it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is, I think we're heading back that direction. I don't know if our sponsors or our producers will allow us to put photos. When I was a kid, I used to watch the photos. My mom had medical books because she was a registered nurse, and I went through these photos and they're just gross. I mean, if we put some of these photos, I don't think people know what it really looks like, but it looks really bad. But we're out of time, so we want to thank our viewers in the United States and around the world, and the people that are learning more about medicine and science. And be careful, because the anti-vaxxers are not medical or science people at all. And we'll see you next week on Medicine and Science. Take care. Bye-bye.